I just want to go ahead and relive a little bit of what happened yesterday. Just kind of go through and what I saw and my reaction to it. So this whole thing starts off with President Trump talking about how we've been ripped off, right? As Americans, we've been ripped off by other countries. That's the story. Now, personally, I don't believe that's the case. I think if a country somewhere else implements tariffs, I think that's their problem. I don't think the US is being ripped off because we have to pay tariffs. That's something you can argue, but that's very much a Milton Friedman way of looking at things. A free trade, easy to do business, it's better for your country. So there's different economic arguments here, and everyone's entitled to their view. If you disagree with it, that's fine. So I don't personally believe as Americans that we're getting ripped off this whole time by doing free trade. But putting aside whatever your personal philosophical economic views are, President Trump goes up there and he makes that case. He makes the argument that the US is being ripped off by other countries. They have these tariffs, we don't. We're paying a tax to do business with them. They're not paying a tax to do business with us. So he's kind of gauging it. He's kind of saying, this is like implementing a fee, like a membership. Like it's like paying the Costco yearly membership to do business with the US consumer. He views the US consumer as this very valuable thing, to have access to our market and our wallet, to have access to all of our consumers that want to spend money, to have all this economic spending power. You have to pay taxes to do so. You have to pay the membership to enter. That's kind of the way that he was phrasing this. And then he brings up this board. Now, the board is comically small. You can't even see it, even with the cameras. The reason that they made it so small is because he said it was windy. So if they made a giant one, it would just blow away. So the reasoning behind it was kind of funny to begin with. But of course, you can't even see what's going on here. He holds this up. The line items are like 12 pixel font, and we can't see what's going on. So we're trying to figure this out, and then he's reading it off one by one. Now, I found an HD version of this same image, the board that he was presenting. Here's an HD version of it. And this is what he calls the reciprocal tariffs. Now, keep in mind, this is just one of the boards. So if you think it's only these like 50 countries, you're wrong. It goes on and on. There's like 6 of these, 6 different images of every country that you can think of. In fact, I guarantee you there's countries you've never heard of before. There's ones listed that didn't even have many people living there, and we're tariffing them as well. Now, looking at this board, there's a few columns here. We have the country or territory off to the left, which is like China, the European Union, Vietnam, so on. Then we have the tariff charge to the USA, which includes currency manipulation and trade barriers. So this percentage right there looks like it's an accumulation of all 3 of those type of factors. You're factoring in the base level tariff they charge. You're also factoring in the fact that other countries manipulate their currency, and also there's trade barriers. Now, trade barriers, for people not familiar, are non-tariff ways that countries make it difficult or taxing or expensive to do business with them. So technically, they're not charging a tariff, but they're really doing the same thing by making it very difficult to import your product and flood your product into their country. For example, China does this all the time. They have forced technology transfers. China has required foreign companies to share and transfer their proprietary technology to Chinese joint ventures. So if you want to do business in China, like if I wanted Qualtrim to do business in China, they may force me to give up proprietary information, to give up the way that I do things, the methods of doing things to other competitors. So you have to make these decisions, which technically aren't tariffs, but they're costly and expensive nonetheless. There's a whole list of them. There's quotas, there's licensing, there's agreements, there's red tapes, there's delays, there's overly scrutinizing inspections, and so on and so forth. Countries can do things to disincentivize imports without a blanket tariff. And I believe that's what was going to be factored in here. So my assumption was that they came up with some type of algorithm or some type of way of calculating the inclusion of trade barriers, price manipulation, and the base level tariff, and that's how they got to this number. But upon further investigation, we found out that these numbers have nothing to do with tariffs or trade barriers in and of themselves. They only have to do with trade imbalances, trade surpluses. We have an administration official that gave us the exact calculation they used to quantify this reciprocal tariff number. Here's what the actual formula looks like. Now, it's been a while since I've done advanced algebra, and I don't recognize a lot of these symbols, but if you break it down, this is basically what it means. You have the exports a country does, minus the imports, divided by the imports. So you're basically just taking the amount of exporting, dividing it by the imports. The United States Trade Representative detailed a formula that divides the country's trade surplus with the US by its total exports, based on data from US Census Bureau in 2024. And then that number was divided by 2, producing the discounted rate. So basically, the number right here where it says tariffs charged to the US doesn't actually represent tariffs charged to the US at all. For most of these countries, like China, you have a 7% tariff. It's very minor. This 67% is the trade imbalance. It's the trade imbalance and surplus that the US has with China. The USTR statement said that while it was technically possible to calculate rates for the actual barriers, this methodology would achieve Trump's goal of driving down trade deficits. So this is showing the relationship of trade we have with these different countries. So it's important when looking at this chart to realize that these two numbers don't represent the same thing. The implication when you compare them side by side is that they're the same thing, that China's charging us 67% to do business in China, and we're only responding with a 34% tax on them. Therefore, we're taxing them less. That's not the case. The 67% is a trade imbalance calculation. It's not a tax. The 34% is a tax. So these two numbers are different. The amount that we're now charging them in tariffs is much larger than what they're charging us. Now, one of the confusing parts of this is President Trump mentioned that even in the cases where a country's doing specifically what we're wanting them to do, what Trump is wanting them to do, which means that they're actually buying more from the US than they're selling to the US. The opposite thing that China's doing, even for those countries where we're selling more to them than what they're selling to us, we're still slapping on a 10% tariff. So we're still saying you have to pay a tariff even when you're doing exactly what we want you to do. So this is a head scratcher to me. I don't know what the incentive here is for charging countries even when they're doing exactly what we're wanting them to do. So we know that the numbers off to the left of what they're charging us aren't exactly accurate, but we can only assume that the numbers that we're going to charge them right here on the right are accurate. This is what we say we're going to charge these other companies in tariffs to do business with the US. We kick things off here with a 34% tariff from China. Now, obviously we get a lot of stuff from China, a lot of imports from China. US consumers really like buying stuff from China. But with a 34% tariff, that becomes dramatically more expensive. And there is a little bit of confusion on this one. We don't really know if this is in addition to the already existing 20% tariff from China, or if it's just going to be 34%. So it might actually be 54%. We don't quite know yet. With the European Union, we now have a 20% tariff on them, so all of Europe. Now, notably, we have some big territories and countries missing, like Canada and Mexico, so I'm still not sure of what we're doing there, but we have tariffs all across Asia: Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, India, South Korea, Thailand, Switzerland, Indonesia, Malaysia. These tariffs range anywhere from 46% for Vietnam. Places where Nike's manufacturing a lot of their goods, all of a sudden their supply chains are in trouble. The cost of doing business in those countries are going to be dramatically higher. So that's the reason that Nike's down big today. What are they going to do in this situation? They really have nowhere else to go. Nike sweatshirts and Nike shoes are going to be dramatically more expensive if this doesn't get removed. And you go through the list here, it doesn't really get any better. And the calculation overall is that this is around a 20% universal tariff, which is a staggering number when you think about a new tax of 20% to the entire world.